This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Wednesday, October 16th, 2019. My guest is Daniel Bader of Android Central. Hi, Daniel. How are you?
Hey, Miriam. I am so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So, big week. We were both at the Google event yesterday. I'm still in New York. You're back home because you live much closer. So what's your takeaway overall?
So it's interesting because there still seem to be a bunch of surprises, even though we knew everything going into it, right?
Yeah.
You know, the products were a known quantity, but I think once we got our hands on them, once we got a chance to see the demo area, it was really impressive.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I went into it very kind of like setting my expectations very low, and I feel a little more uplifted now that all of it is said and done.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. You know, the products are always better than the leaks. I think that bears out every year, and Google especially has a reputation, not necessarily of over-delivering on the products, and I think we'll talk about that. You know, last year there were some disappointments with the Pixel 3, and before that with the Pixel 2, but I just think the presentations are really impressive. I think Google does a fantastic job sort of disseminating their message, whether people agree with their message or not. And the overall just like the smoothness of the event was apparent, right? Once the keynote was over, we got to go and play with the devices, and they're really, really lax about what we do in that room, right? We were able to just walk around with the phones. Nobody was babysitting us. It was really different to, say, a Samsung or a Huawei event where everything is like either tethered down or there's like a one-to-one ratio of employee to journalists when they're like looking over your shoulder to see what you're doing with the phone.
I agree. And I think I want to, I don't want this to be a Google Love Fest. I have some things I just want to make it clear to the audience here. But to get started, for me, what I felt this time as a presentation is I feel like Google has finally found a rhythm and a voice and kind of really a brand for Pixel. And you really felt that this time. I kind of started feeling it a little bit with the 2, and then a little even more with the 3. And now with the Pixel 4, it's like it's strong. It's there. It's clear. I don't necessarily like it and agree with all of their takes on things, but it's nice to see them kind of gel a personality, because Google has always been this weird malleable blob in terms of their presentation to the world, and this is gelling it for me. And I know this is technical, but I want to really give a kudos to the people who planned this event in terms of the stage, the lighting, and the presentation, because holy crap, the lighting was insanely good. Like, I have never been in a place where I've taken photos with a phone where every photo I took with any phone I tried came out good. Like, I didn't have to edit for like overexposed or underexposed shots, because somehow the person on the stage and the stage itself was lit just as evenly as the display that was overhead. You know what I'm saying? That never happens, right? And
100%.
I was like, wow. And so I remember that being the case last year as well, but not quite to this extent. Like, I was like, whoever did this, I mean, this is always the vein of my existence when I do live blogging, as it were. Live tweeting is what I do of these events with my phone. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there were some lulls. The presentation definitely, ebbed and flowed. I think there was a portion right after Rick Osterloh did his introduction, there was a portion where Google talked about sustainability, recycling, design, that the presenter was not quite as dynamic as perhaps some of the others. And, I think the message was really, really strong. Google is doubling down on recycled materials. All of the Nest products use some percentage of recycled plastics this year, which is commendable. There's a $150 million investment in renewable energy sources that they're putting towards markets that don't typically focus on renewable energies. But again, this is all just marketing, right? This is just a way of Google patting itself on the back and saying that we're doing a great job. And a lot of that, I think, was a response to Apple typically doing the same thing at its own presentations.
Oh, I have to say that as much as I think Google found its own voice, I also feel like there's a lot of parallels in their voice and some of Apple's, but it's still their distinct personality. In fact, my tweet was, I quote, something at Google, something sustainable, something windmills, smiley. My hashtag Model 3 approves. Hashtag made by Google. That was my tweet, and that was a photo of that windmill sunset photo that they had on the screen. I do want to kind of dive into the more meaty stuff, if you don't mind, though, because I kind of want to start by talking about something that my listeners are well aware of, but I don't think I've ever expressed it to you, Daniel, is my Stockholm syndrome around being a Pixel user and how the Pixel 4 affects that. Like, I have a love-hate relationship with my Pixel devices, and I've had this for a while now, and I can never seem to get over it. Like, I'm still daily driving a Pixel, despite my, some really serious frustrations at times with the product. But I still feel that there's so much joy and goodness there that I kind of feel like, I've learned to like my captors, basically. That's kind of the joke, right?
I get it.
Yeah, so
I
haven't really, just to be clear, I've played with the Pixel 4. You might be a little bit ahead of me. You might be actually using it now because I haven't unboxed mine yet. I still need to do an unboxing video. But I have spent time with it, and I also feel a little more positive now that I've spent time with it than prior to the event. And so there's a bunch of things I'm happy about and a bunch of things I'm not happy about. And I'm sure you have your laundry list as well. Do you want to start with your laundry list? You pick pros and cons. I don't know. Just tell me what you feel they've done better, what you feel that you're kind of scratching your head about, and maybe what you feel that has changed in your use of the device for the last 12 hours.
Yeah, I mean, the phone is, it's a very utilitarian product, and as every Google product is. The unboxing experience is not flashy. The setup experience is pretty straightforward. This feels like a Google phone. I got the black version, which is glossy on the back. Not a huge fan of that. I would have preferred the matte finish on the white or the orange version. The screen is great. The 90 hertz display is excellent. The quality of the OLED panel is excellent across both phones this year. Our friends at Android Police, Ryan Hager, he actually did like a technical test on the screen to see whether its black levels were consistent. And they are. They're much better and more consistent across the gamut than the Pixel 3. And that phone was much better than the Pixel 2. As we know, the Pixel 2
the
screens
Pixel 2
were
was
disasters.
I honestly never had any issues with the 3, but the 2 had a lot of issues with that screen. And I'm not a screen picky person because my eyes aren't very good. I can live with 1080p screen all day long, and even slight imperfections is something I can kind of brush away because I don't notice. But even the 2 was like, oh no. So yeah, the 3 was okay, and supposedly and they did say that in the keynote. They said the 4 was the best display they've ever made, right?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, it's obviously not their own display. It's probably a Samsung display, as we'll find soon. But, the 90 hertz refresh rate does make a difference, even though it's dynamic. So you can't force it unless you go into the developer options.
Oh, interesting.
XDA developers, they found an override so that you can force 90 hertz on all apps, which I think I'm going to do. Just coming from the OnePlus 7T, I love it. It's amazing. The overall build is great. I love the matte black sides. It's really, really easy to grip. I actually like the camera design. Don't hate me. I really think it does not look as bad.
No, I don't hate it
in
either.
Person.
I don't mind.
And I don't know, the chin forehead discrepancy thing is what it is, because like Face Unlock is super fast, and there's some security concerns around that. There's no option in the current build to force your eyes to be open to unlock your phone. I think that was going to be added in a later build. But yeah, overall, I think this is a really nice looking phone, and there's a lot to like here.
Right, absolutely. For me, the thing that stands out now that I've touched it and used it is how nice it feels in hand. I'm surprised, actually. It's hard to tell what materials this phone is made of, which I don't like. I like my materials to be nice and cold and non-organic. So in in the sense of like glass and metal and stone. I'm not a big fan of plastics, and well, plastics are not organic, but you know what I'm saying. Like the thing about this is weird is it feels like a rubberized back, but it's glass, right?
It is glass, yeah. It's
But it feels rubberized. If you run your fingernail on it, it feels like it's got soft touch finish on it.
Yeah, Google's good at that. I mean, last year too, with the glass back, there was that matte,
Yeah,
overlay.
but last year was clearly matte. It was clearly etched matte. This year, you don't know when you touch it if it is glass or not. And actually, I'm hoping it's not some kind of paint or finish on the glass, because that's going to come off eventually. And it's going to look like hell. I don't know if you've ever seen those soft-coated plastics. Anyway, we'll see. In the edge, it's hard to tell whether the edge is a really high-quality machine polycarbonate that's really high density, or if it's aluminum, because you can't see any antenna bands.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it is aluminum. We know it's aluminum.
So, yeah.
I don't know. It is interesting. Google's done a really good job. I think, they same thing with the Pixelbook. They've painted over a lot of the lines. So right. I think that's what they've done.
The Pixelbook is magnesium, and it doesn't feel like it feels like plastic to me. And I know I trust them. Like, it's just, I really don't like it when a phone feels like plastic or a laptop feels like plastic when it's made out of metal. Like, the first thing I can think of is magnesium laptops like ThinkPads, right? ThinkPads have been magnesium forever, and they still have that soft touch black finish on them. And that's a coat. And that's basically, think of a ThinkPad with rounded edges and and I guess there is a black version, so a black finish or a pinkish finish. And that's what the Pixelbook Go looks and feels like. And I'm not 100% convinced I like that better than the raw aluminum and silicone of the Pixelbook. But I don't want to switch to the Pixelbook just yet. I just have a few more things I want to talk about on the Pixel 4. So my thing that I liked about it in my hands-on was the way it felt in hand and the way it looks. I'm thankfully, my review in it is what's coral? Is that the color? What's it called?
Oso orange.
Oso orange. So I have the Oso orange, for better or worse.
I'm so jealous.
Get this. So it's a Pixel 4 XL Oso orange with the yellow case to go with it. A weird yellow leather case. I'm like, this is going to be quite the phone when I pull it out of my pocket, right? Because I'm not going to not put a case on it. They have a little yellow leather case in the bag. And so anyway, I'm digressing. What I'm getting to is that the design, I like the design a lot. Like, I'm very torn on this material and the coating of the materials. I'm not sure I like the coating, but I will go with this design. This is a cool design. The camera pod, I feel kind of meh about, not good or bad. I'm just generically okay with it, because I think Apple did it better, to be honest with you. Like, I feel like that's the way they did the square pod on the iPhone, at least on the Pro, it's like in your face, and it's like, this looks like, one of those tri-barrel video cameras from the 50s, when television used cameras with 3 lenses and they could rotate the lens. It looks like you're facing one of these when you're looking at like an iPhone camera pod. But this is much more subtle. This reminds me more of the square pod on the Mate 20 Pro, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Apple leaned into it, whether, for better or for worse.
I know some people hate it, and I get it. I don't. I think this is a very personal thing. I will never be upset for anybody hating the camera pods on back of phones, because I like round ones more than square ones. I don't like the inline ones very much, like the Samsung Galaxy ones. So my favorite right now is like the OnePlus 7T and the Mate 30 Pro and the Vivo NEX3. Right now I'm kind of into that vibe. Or the Lumia 1020, but that was a little overdone because the phone was so small, it just felt out of proportion on that one. You know what I'm saying?
You know what's weird to me though, Miriam, is like the fact that I don't have a fingerprint sensor on the back to rest my finger on.
Exactly.
It's weird.
I was going to bring that up. So I haven't used the phone yet, so this hasn't been an issue in my just hands-on because all these phones were unlocked. But yeah, how is that? How is that Soli chip combined with the the 3D Face ID working for you? Is it better than Apple, or is it on par with Apple? Like, is it transparent? Do you not notice it?
Oh, it's not. It's totally transparent. It's faster than Face ID because the screen automatically turns on when you approach the phone.
Of course.
So that's, you don't have to tap the screen like you do on an iPhone. And it is faster, but it may be at the expense of some security because you can unlock it with your eyes closed.
Oh, and there's no setting to force that.
Not yet. The Vietnamese leaks, the ones that came out a few weeks ago, they looked at the security settings and there was that feature. So it may have been they may have been using a dog food build that is not available to the public yet. And I'd imagine Google will either add that before public release next week or just put it out in a future update. But I have no doubt Google is, figuring out the kinks and will update it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing for me is, and I've talked about this with Renee Ritchie at iMore, or rather at Vector, who is part of your, little posse over there at Android Central in some weird way, right? Because of mobile nations.
We're coworkers.
Of course. So I talked to Renee about this over the years. I mean, we all go way back, as you know, and I think the future of authentication on a phone is a multifaceted future. I think it's a future where you have sensors all over the front and back of the phone, like touch sensors, like essentially fingerprint scanners. And you have optical and other radar, LiDAR, whatever sensors for 3D mapping that are combined into, you pick up a phone, by just touching it, it has an idea who it is. It might not have a full fingerprint or a full 100% confidence. Like every sensor gives a level of confidence on who it is. And if together combined, they give you a 99.9 level of confidence, then it unlocks the phone. You know what I'm saying? This is where we're going. So I'm a little concerned with this weird thing that's happened with Apple through 2 years ago and now Google, of switching fully to optics or radar or LiDAR, or, because essentially, project an array of dots, which is what Apple's doing, is essentially LiDAR. It's just a different way of doing it. So, I'm concerned that we should combine the two. And I'm not saying that I don't think we have the technology for that, because right now you'd have to have an in-display or rear fingerprint scanner, and it would all have to be in one place, and that doesn't make sense. But when we can develop entire capacitive surfaces that can catch a part of a palm print, part of a fingerprint by just you touching the phone, and combining that with a visual ID, I think it's going to be, the most secure that we've ever had, right? So I think this is a step in the right direction, but taking it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back in a way. Like I'm on board. I want to try it. I'm okay with it, but I feel like because it's an Android device and we have a legacy of fingerprint technology that I think is actually pretty good, I would have liked to see an optional alternative in case you didn't want to do that, right?
Right, and that's something that I've thought about a lot, right? Like in the early days, there are going to be apps that haven't been updated to support the new Face Unlock APIs. So banking apps in particular. I think
these apps, I think they're just going to work because they're talking to the secure enclave and they're getting a signature from the secure enclave that says this is valid. It does. I don't think it makes any difference. It's basically the apps talk to a black box and the black box says authenticated, or the black box says not authenticated. That's it, right? Like, because that's exactly how you keep that stuff secure, right? So I'm pretty sure that that's not, everything's just going to work out of the box.
It doesn't, though. The problem is it's an API. So technically, that's correct. You have the same checks and balances with the secure enclave. They don't treat a fingerprint or a Face ID any differently. But the apps themselves have to update to the latest Android SDK to be able to identify the new API. And if they haven't, the app will just ignore it and won't allow you to log in authentically.
So have you found anything that doesn't work yet? Like I use everything with fingerprints, my banks.
Everything except 1Password. So none of my banking apps, none of, there's I think 5 or 6 apps. Google sent us a statement this morning that gave us the list, and it's not very long. I'll give you the list right now. It's Dashlane, Keeper, Password Safe, Robinhood, and 1Password. That's it. It's 5 apps.
That's not good at all.
So all of the banking apps, right? The ones that you use every day.
That's what I use a fingerprint.
Those are not going to work.
You don't understand. My Tesla is fingerprinted.
Yeah, that's bad. So you'll have to use either a PIN or your full password every time.
That means I'm not switching to a Pixel 4 until they fix that. I cannot do it. Like, I do so many, like, I use my fingerprint multiple times a day for authentication on my phone at this point. And passwords is the least of it. It's like banking. I mean, how many apps do I have? Like, almost anything. Like United Airlines, if I want to log in and change something in my reservation, it's fingerprinted.
Right. And just think about, it's such a trivial thing for app developers, but how long will these big corporations take to push out that update? Because it's, things break when you point to a new Android SDK. There are dependencies that you have to check for, and if some of those dependencies break older phones, and those older phones are not able to use particular features, they're just not going to do it. So Google is pushing developers to update their apps by next year. January 2020 is, I think, when they're giving devs a cutoff. But for the intervening 4 months, that's going to be hell for a lot of us who rely on apps with these biometric APIs.
Well, I think, I don't have too many obscure ones. Like, my banks and my United Airlines and my Tesla will be fine. I mean, the Tesla is only needed when I want to do major changes. So just getting in the car, I won't need that. But yeah, it's that's problematic. I really thought that they would have done it completely transparently. Wow. Well, anyway, I mean, you touched on something earlier that kind of resonated with me a bit, is that the 90 hertz. I didn't even mention the 90 hertz in my hands-on video yesterday. I kind of forgot about it because on that phone, it's like, now that I have had it on the OnePlus 7T for a while and I use it all the time, it's so good, but it's also so normal to me that I kind of feel like, okay, it's there. But yeah, it's definitely makes a difference in terms of a user experience. Have you played with them side by side, the 7T and the Pixel 4 yet? Like, do they both feel as fluid? Because I think a lot of it on the OnePlus is optimized build of Android 10, right? Like, they optimize the crap out of their OSs, right?
Yeah, this is not nearly as smooth. And I'm not to say that, 190 hertz is more hertzy, right? Like, it's the same.
Right.
But Google clearly doesn't employ the 90 hertz in as many areas. Right. So, for example, on Twitter, I don't even know. Like, I don't think it's using 90 hertz. I don't actually. I can say right now it's not. So there are areas of the UI where it does feel smoother, but compared to the OnePlus phones, I think they use a much heavier hand, and that's my preference because 90 hertz all day. I also think on a phone this size, right, with a 2800 milliamp hour battery, I'd prefer them to be more careful and deliberate where they use it, because this battery is small enough and 90 hertz eats up battery like crazy.
Yeah, and you're talking about the small Pixel 4. The bigger one has the 3700 milliamp hour, which again is very average at best, right? These battery sizes, even though it's a Snapdragon 855, are a little, could be better, It's on my to be improved list. Same with the RAM. 6 gigs was much needed. My Stockholm syndrome, a big part of it is my biggest amount of my frustration on my Pixel 3 XL has been running out of RAM. And it manifests itself in, I'm on Twitter, I'm typing in a reply, I get interrupted by a notification of something that's critical, I go to it, I do something else, I get a bunch of apps running, I eventually get carried away doing something else. Finally, I remember I was tweeting, I go back to Twitter, and Twitter restarts, and my answer is lost, right? This happens pretty much once a week to me on my Pixel 3 XL. And there's nothing worse than that, right? It's all RAM, it's just because it's bumped the app out of RAM. And 6 gigs feels better. Of course, it's better. Like, I'm not going to argue about it. Like, I'm welcoming that change. But where's my 8 gigs, Google? Right?
It does not. There are a bunch of decisions around this phone that I understand. Right? With Google being relatively conservative in the decisions it makes. For example, there's no Wi-Fi 6 on here. Not a big deal. Most people don't need Wi-Fi 6. However, 6 gigs of RAM in a market where this is being put up against the best of the best from Samsung and Huawei.
Never mind this. I'm about to publish a story on Geekspin. 6 Android flagships under $600 All of them have more RAM than that. Every single one has 8 gigs. So where's your excuse, Google? It's like you're paying $7.99 minimum, $8.99 for the bigger one minimum for a 64 gigs of storage version with 6 gigs of RAM. Get out of town.
The only thing that I can think of is that more RAM uses more energy, right? It has.
Yeah, but then put a bigger battery in. Then I mean, OnePlus has a 4,200 milliamp, whatever, 4,000 milliamp battery, and like in their 7T or 7 Pro. I mean, the 7T is 3,800. It's like make it bigger. I just feel like I don't know.
So I talked to Google about this. I had an interview with the one of the heads of the Google Pixel team, and he said that the Pixel 4 series is already thicker than the Pixel 3. And a lot of that comes down to the stuff at the top, right?
Yeah.
It's the radar takes up a lot of space. This is the smallest they could have made it, but it's still massive.
For sure.
And that really ate into how big the battery could have been.
Right. Well,
so,
again, you were talking about the pros and cons. This is like my gut feeling is RAM is lacking, even though it's better. And storage at 64, you're laughing. It's like remember when Apple made 16 gigabyte phones at their base a while back, and we were all rolling our eyes. I roll my eyes at 64 gigs. I'm sorry. 128 is kind of the starting point these days. I feel like I used to not fill up 64, but I'm close to it now.
Yeah, you know what? It feels rude.
Yeah,
it feels rude.
It feels rude.
If you're charging this much money for a phone, it feels rude. It's not like the Pixel 3a starts at 32 gigs, right?
Yeah,
it's a $399 phone. Default 64.
You're right.
There's no excuse.
Yeah. So that's some of the things that I like and dislike. So the 90 hertz is good. The in fingerprint, the lack of display or in display fingerprint or rear fingerprint is, I think, bad. I think having both would be good, especially in this interim period. Until the apps can adapt to use the Face ID. I do welcome Face ID, though. I'm not one of those people who thinks Face ID is a bad thing. I've used it on iPhones. I think it's good. I like it. It's a secure and great solution. I just want to see both. Battery, man, not so good. Could be better. I like the design, but I'm a little torn on the way the materials feel. The big question now for me is the camera, right? So obviously, I think that what was the guy's name? Leroy was his last name?
On stage?
Yeah. He was awesome. An ex-Stanford or maybe still current Stanford professor.
Mark Levoy.
Levoy, not Leroy. Yeah, Mark Levoy was one of the best speakers at this presentation yesterday. He really had me glued to my seat, like looking and going, wow. He spoke about all computational photography and what they've been doing and how they've been doing it. And not only was he a great presenter, and he was really kind of like, you wanted to listen to him. That's probably from teaching at a university for 30 years. But he knew his stuff, and I think what he said made a lot of sense. All that being said, I'm sure the camera is going to kick ass. I think it might even surpass the iPhone 11 in low light now with this new light sight. The tests will tell when the reviews come out, but I am bummed that they didn't put an ultra wide lens in there, and that instead they put a telephoto, and a crappy telephoto at that, in the sense that it's 2x, it's got 1 micron pixels, an f-stop of 2.4, right? F over 2.4, and you're right that we've seen Google blow us away with kind of generic hardware on the camera systems. Like the main sensor it doesn't look like the main sensor is any different. 12 megapixel, f over 1.7, 1.4 micron pixels. I thought they were going to put an IMX 586 in there and optimize the crap out of it. That awesome 48 megapixel sensor that some companies like Honor with the 20 Pro have really made it work incredibly well. I thought they were going to do that, but no, they stayed, with true and proven technology, and then they added a kind of crappy 16 megapixel telephoto to it. I know the hardware doesn't mean anything because they do so much computational stuff, but I kind of feel like I would have much rather liked a wide angle myself, no matter what they said on stage, because they justified that nobody needs a wide angle, and I think that's wrong. Everybody needs a wide angle.
Here's my take on this, right? Because I've used the camera now, and I see what Google is thinking. So every other phone manufacturer with a ultra wide or a telephoto lens, you explicitly have toggles in the camera app for 1x, 2x, or with Huawei or OnePlus 3x, 5x, 0.5x, right? You can actually press those automatically to go to the different cameras. With Google, that's not what they do. It's a continuity. It's a system. So for example, you slide from 1x all the way to 2x and then beyond. And they do not give you the option of going directly to 2x. Why? Because the 2x camera is only meant to enhance their super res zoom feature.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
It's meant to give you better telephoto regardless of whether you're at 2x, 5x, or 10x.
Or even 1.5x.
Exactly. So
Right.
this is their way of providing more data rather than giving you just a 56 millimeter equivalent focal length. And I think that strategy makes way more sense. If you look at it in a googly way, right? It gives them depth data for portrait mode, which they didn't have before.
I get it, yeah.
And all that, if kind of look at it holistically, this is Google at its most like counterintuitive, and yet it makes way more sense.
And I agree, but at the same time, why not start at 0.6 or 0.5, right? I mean, at that point, why not have 3 cameras and blend the 3? Apple's doing it. They're blending them very seamlessly. When you zoom back and forth, you barely see the switch.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I would have rather had an ultra wide. I think they're way more useful.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's nice to do what they're doing. I applaud the computational efforts in that. It's very impressive. But is it what people need and want? Most of the time, like I'm still in New York, and I was walking around yesterday and today, and every time I wanted to take a photo, almost every single photo I took was a ultra wide, because there's nothing I can do. Everything is so close to me that I have to pretty much, to get any sense of the scale, because I'm in around Times Square right now. It's very good for photos. It's kind of tickling my creative fancy. I'm shooting ultra wide all the time. And I can't even imagine what it'd be like to be with a phone like an iPhone XS that doesn't have ultra wide, or the Pixel 4 for that matter. It feels like, I agree with what you're saying, and I get where Amazon, what the hell? I get where Google's coming from, but I feel like it feels like their phone is last year's phone. It feels like last year Apple had or for the last, whatever, since the iPhone 8 or 6S, right? Was the first with tele. For a number of years now, Apple's had a flagship with 2 cameras with a telephoto and a main lens. And, oh, hey, look, here we are finally doing the same. I mean, that's what it kind of feels like to me. It feels like they're playing catch up. And yet at the same time, yeah, they're not in so many ways. Like intellectually, I'm well aware that what they're doing is kind of tremendous. But when I go out there to shoot stuff, when you're going to shoot pictures of your kid, Daniel, you're going to want that ultra wide. That's the reality.
So I get that, and I kind of agree with you, but none of the ultra wides, except for
Huawei,
maybe Huawei, maybe Apple, do a good enough job with detail that makes me want to shoot people with it. So I'd much rather have a really good main sensor, that gets skin tones right, gets enough detail to make it worthwhile. You said shooting photos of my daughter, like that's basically all I do now. And I found that very few phones capture enough facial detail to make those photos enjoyable to look at. And Apple does it, Google does it, and Huawei does it, but you have to tweak Huawei's skin tones in post.
Huawei is one of those that I agree. It's not quite there. Although I hear, and I haven't tried it yet, I hear that the Mate 30 Pro, the unobtainium phone, is, and I say that because of the history of the podcast now, of me talking about using the Honor 9X Pro with GMS, without GMS and all the troubles. You and I had a conversation about that yesterday. That's why I think it's an unobtainium phone at this point. But the Mate 30 Pro, from what I hear, really has stepped the game up for the ultra wide, because it's using the same, I think, 40 megapixel sensor that's in the main cam, and so it's tons of detail. tons of computational potential, right, from all that data. Right. I don't have proof of that, but I hear from a number of people that I trust that it's really quite impressive. And you're right. I mean, the problem with ultra-wide is you get lens distortion. Yeah, all kinds of issues. There's a lot of ultra-wide implementations out there that suck. But look at what Apple's doing. Apple is the king of portraits, right? Apple is really the first company to understand that what we use our cameras really for. And I give them credit for that. I feel like in the camera phone world, they're really the ones who've looked at like, what are the use cases for our customers? And it's exactly what you described. Your kid, right? That's the use case for so many people, their kid, their dog, whatever. And, the fact that Apple went ahead and put an ultra wide in the Pro shows that, they're serious about this and they think it's necessary. But more than that, and this is the thing that blows me away, Apple went ahead and put an ultra wide in the cheap phone, not putting a tele in the cheap phone. That goes completely against what I was expecting from Apple. I figured that they would take their legacy tech, the stuff they'd been doing for a while, since the iPhone 6S Max or Plus or whatever it was called, the big 6S. With a telephoto and bring it to the 11, because that would have been the kind of the easy solution, right? But no, they went and put the ultra wide in there with the regular sensor, not the tele. And that's just kind of why I think that Google missed the boat. No matter how good this implementation is going to be, I don't think too many people are going to care about taking slightly better telephoto photos, honestly. It's going to be a party trick. It's going to be like, oh, look at that. I can match the P30 Pro with its 5x optical zoom now using super zoom with a 2x telephoto. And it's going to fall apart in low light because it's going to have to rely on the main sensor in low light because the secondary sensor is a 1 micron f/2.4 sensor. It's going to suck in low light.
So here's my take on this. I don't actually think Google cares about multiple cameras. This is not a priority for them. It's about data. If you think about Google as a company, how do they think about things? They don't think about things in terms of features like Apple does. They think about data and how much data can they accrue from those various bits of hardware in their products. And I'm not saying that like features themselves are not important. Obviously, with motion sense and face unlock, they are important enough. They have to tell a story after all. But I do think that when it comes to cameras, Google is just about getting as much data as possible to feed them back into their machine learning algorithms so that later on, down the road, when they update their phones, they will take better photos the first time. And that's what this is. It's an exercise in getting more data. And if you look at it that way, the telephoto actually makes way more sense than the ultra-wide because you're getting more valuable data. And again, like that's my theory, and I think it makes sense in light of the Pixel 4. But I also know it's going to be super disappointing to a lot of people, including me.
I agree with you 100%. I think it's very googly, but the market is where it's at right now, and I feel like the Pixel is not the most popular phone, and it should be way more popular. And there's so many little things they could do to make it more popular. At this price point, which is reasonable, but at this point, here's my take. I would rather see Google sell the big one, for $999, like match the Samsungs and Apples of the world in the $1,000 realm, and give me an in-display fingerprint reader that I can use or not use. Give me a a wide-angle lens, a third wide-angle lens that I can or cannot use, and let me decide. And have 8 gigs of RAM and a minimum of 128 gigs of storage, and really have a kick-ass flagship, and bump that battery to maybe 38 or 3900. This is not rocket science. Samsung's doing it, Apple's doing it. Google should have no issues with their deep pockets to do this, and they could still get all their computational data and be all googly. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a cop-out. I think we're giving them, at this price point, we're giving them a pass. Because if you look at what OnePlus is doing, we're giving them a pass, and I don't want to do that. If this phone was $699, I'd be like totally fine. If this phone is not, it's $899, because I'm talking about the big one. And at that price, like, all the googliness is nice, but it doesn't help me when I want to take a photo and I don't have an ultra wide. And it doesn't help me when half of my banking apps don't work because they have to update the apps. And it doesn't help me when I run out of battery because the battery's too small. Like, you and I review Android phones. We have to tell people what they come to us all the time and say, what should I buy? Half the time I tell them to go buy an iPhone and F off, right? Because that's what they really need. It's terrible.
Yeah, I see more pixels in the wild than I think, than I thought I would. Then it makes sense to. I think we haven't discussed a couple of things that are important here. This is the first Pixel flagship release that's going to be on all 4 US carriers.
That is a huge deal.
Right? So Verizon is still going to be, Verizon is the most popular carrier in the US, and it's always going to be that way. But T-Mobile steals a lot of customers from Google, and you have people in their stores incentivized to sell particular phones. Yeah. And I have no doubt that Google is working with T-Mobile to make sure that when you walk into a T-Mobile store or a Metro by T-Mobile store, they're going to show you a Pixel 4 and its fast face unlock and this weird gimmicky motion sense thing, and people are going to be impressed. And that's maybe the first exposure they'll ever have to a Pixel phone.
True that. I hope that's the case, although T-Mobile is also selling the OnePlus 7T, right? So tough sell there.
Is it though? I think it's a totally different market, right? Like the 7T it's a big phone. It's very like metal, and I think it appeals to enthusiasts, right?
You're right.
I'd argue that it's better value than the Pixel 4.
You're right that it's also a big phone, and there is a Pixel 4, which is a small phone that feels really nice in hand.
I get you make a really good point though, Miriam, and I don't know how Google. This has been Google's biggest problem for years, and it's not getting any easier because competition is even more intense this year. If you walk into a T-Mobile store and you see a beautiful OnePlus 7T next to a Pixel 4, which kind of looks meh, yeah, I don't know. That's a really hard sell.
And then there's the other problem, right? Like, we're talking about the underdogs here in the room. There's also Samsung and Apple in the room going, hello, we exist and we make the best phones in the world. And arguably they do, since I know you're rocking a Note 10 small one right now. And arguably they do, because half the people at the event yesterday had iPhone 11s, Pros.
Even our colleague David Ruddock, who runs Android Police, was using an iPhone 11 Pro. That's some balls on him. I gotta give him credit. So
that's just because Dave is a shit disturber, and I love him for it.
Yeah, he is. But I mean, I had an iPhone 11 Pro in my bag. Most Android, Stephen Hall from 9 to 5 Google also uses an iPhone 11 Pro. All of us Android site runners, we have iPhones, and there's a reason for that. It's because it's a really good freaking phone.
This year is a really freaking amazing phone.
Right, and if you ignore that, if you're just an Android fan person and think, hey, I'm not even going to pretend that the iPhone exists, you're doing yourself a disservice because, you can't put your head in the sand and pretend that your family, your friends, the people that you are going to be arguing to buy an Android phone, they're just going to ignore you because the iPhone 11 Pro is the best iPhone that Apple's ever made. And there's a really, there's a more tantalizing reason to buy it this year than any previous year. So it was important that Google get everything right on the Pixel 4 from the get-go. And I don't know, you tell me, did they do that?
And I don't think so. And that's why I'm trying to say, like, you walk into a T-Mobile store, that was the premise here, and you now have, the new Pixels. Okay, great. But next to it is the OnePlus 7T, which is a big phone. It's a different approach for sure, but it's at the price point it's selling is like, oh, wow, look, I could save all this money and get all these specs. Right? Like, and you know that if you walk away with that phone, it's a good freaking phone. Right? It's not like in the old days where you could buy the phone that had the best specs for the money and you had a crappy experience. We all know this is a good experience. Right? Possibly the best Android experience in terms of fluidity on any device ever made for Android, ever, of all time. Right? That's a big deal. And then next to that, you have a Samsung Note 10 and you have a freaking iPhone 11 Pro. And I don't think it's going to fly. I just don't think it's going to fly. So, yes, we're going to see more Pixels because it's going to be at more carriers. And I think we do see more Pixels. But I live in San Francisco where a lot of people have Pixels because a lot of people are in tech and a lot of people are Google users. But I also see a big majority of iPhones, even in the tech world, as you know from the journalists yesterday, a lot of them Android journalists using iPhones. And why do they use an iPhone? Because, well, it's brand new and shiny and it's also a very good phone this year. But the imaging on this phone, on the iPhone 11, any 11 you pick, is so good. It's the first time that Apple has really been able to match and surpass in some places what Pixel has been doing. And so the truth will be in the pudding. Is the Pixel 4 able to hold its own now versus the iPhone 11 with one less camera? No matter what googliness you want to add to the equation, right? And that's what we're going to have to see. And then the other thing I think is a big deal here is that, we have a bunch of cheaper players that are really disrupting the market that are now available in US carriers like OnePlus. So it changes the game quite a bit. I think a lot of people use the iPhone, the creative people that we know, the journalists, even if they're Android people, because for example, Instagram is a big part of what we do, and the Instagram app is so much superior on iOS than it is on Android, right? So in image quality and everything in features, and so that's why a lot of people use it. I know that I pack an iPhone just in case because of that. It's like I have an iPhone 10. It's no big deal. It's 2 years old. But it does the job. And that's the other thing. My iPhone 10 that's 2 years old runs as smoothly as my OnePlus 7T. Okay? It's 2 years old and runs as well as a brand new, state-of-the-art, the most fluid ever of all time Android phone. I don't want to, make a mess here, but I was really hoping Google could just reset button here and show us how it's done. And they didn't do that.
Can they do that though?
It's their job to do that.
This is a Pixel, so they're making a piece of hardware, but it's still running Android.
It's their job to show the rest of the world how to make an Android phone properly. OnePlus shouldn't be doing it for them.
Oh yeah, I don't know what magic OnePlus puts in Oxygen OS, but it really does feel smoother and just an overall better experience than a Pixel. It's weird.
It's weird. Listen, we need to move on to the other stuff.
Because
this show is really an hour. Is really an hour and 15 minutes. Yeah, this is really we covered a lot, and we could go on forever. Don't worry, this is going to be an ongoing debate. The reviews won't be out for a little while. We have an embargo, so stay tuned for the reviews. Definitely stay tuned to Android Central because they're going to have super deep coverage with phone camera comparisons and every stuff that I can't do because I don't have the time and resources. So. I'll put links to everything in the description below. But quickly talk about the Chromebook Go. We touched on it a little bit, the material and the finishes. I'm torn about that. I do feel torn about this because I feel like this is... I'm a big Chromebook person. I love Chromebooks. And I'm a Pixelbook user right now because, well, they send me a review in it. And it's honestly the best Chromebook ever made by a long shot. The Pixel Slate was a disaster last year. Everybody agrees. So I'm torn by this thing because $649, it's more affordable, but it's still not cheap. I feel like if they were going to make a cheap Chromebook, it should be $399, $499. It's really beautiful, and the keyboard is exquisite. The trackpad is exquisite. That's true of the Pixelbook as well. The display, though, isn't very bright. It's 16:9, which I think is the wrong aspect ratio for a computer, especially a portable computer. So for me, laptops should be 3.3 by 2, and I feel there's obviously all the Macs are like that, and all the a lot of the Pixel laptops up to now were like that, and some Windows PCs are like that, like the Surface laptop, which I think is definitely potentially one of the best PCs ever made, especially the Laptop 3 now. So the question is, in that universe, where do you put a very nicely made but slightly flawed and not so cheap, could be cheaper, but cheaper already, but I'm kind of torn on the price, Chromebook Go? How do you feel about it?
I've been using it this morning. I unboxed it, and it's a good laptop. It's a quality Chromebook. It feels pixelbooky, like same keyboard, same high quality trackpad. The overall build quality is excellent, especially when you can get that same exterior for the entry-level $649 price. We talked about the magnesium overlay. It's made of magnesium. Google says it's a cheaper material to use, but it does not sacrifice robustness, which I appreciate. As you said, the ThinkPads have been magnesium for years, and it's lighter as a result. This is a really light laptop, and I love the fact that I can just throw it in my bag and kind of forget about it. The deal breaker for me is going to be that 16:9 screen. I hate it.
And it's honestly,
it's so dumb.
It was so dark too. Like I know we were in a bright place with a lot of sunlight, but it didn't hold a candle to any modern laptop that I know in the same environment. It was too dim.
Google says it's rated for 400 nits.
That's nothing. 1,000 nits is a modern smartphone at its peak. 600 is an average smartphone.
Laptop screens are not typically that bright, right? You don't need to be using them in direct sunlight.
I agree, but a lot of modern laptops are at least 600 nits.
Totally. And this definitely feels dimmer than it should be. 2 USB-C ports, 12-hour battery life across the entire lineup, including the 4K version. The black model is fine. It's very nondescript. I'm really sad that the what's it called, pinkish?
Slightly pink.
Yeah, slightly pink is not available across the entire lineup. It's only for the more expensive models, and it's not available at launch. So every early adopter of the Pixelbook Go is going to be getting the boring black version, which again, matte black everything looks nice, but I don't know. I like that pink model.
Is that a black one? What they give you?
Yeah, and that's the only color option, right? Like,
that's too bad.
Google, it's I like the wavy bottom. That's what Google called it. The wavy bottom makes it a bit more textured and easier to hold.
Yeah.
But overall, I don't know what the strategy is, right? This is a back to basics Chromebook in the sense that the Pixel Slate was a disaster. They needed to reset and find their footing again. This isn't a 2-in-1. The screen doesn't flip back and become a tablet. This is a laptop. And for $650, you can get better Chromebooks. So, Chromebook, like the Chromebook lineup from Asus to Acer to Dell to HP, there are some really good options out there. And I'd argue that the new Asus Chromebook Flip C434, which is a little bit cheaper. It's about $550. It's a better option than the Pixelbook Go. So, I'm not ready to review it yet. I haven't made my conclusions. But just from the outset, I think this will be, it's not quite a pro Chromebook, and it's not quite an entry-level Chromebook. It falls somewhere in between, and I'm not sure who the buyer is for it.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, I'm excited that they made another Pixelbook. And I'm excited that it's beautiful and it feels great. And I'm sure the battery life was going to be great based on my existing Pixelbook. But I'm a little torn about the positioning of the pricing and this display choice, both in brightness and aspect ratio. That's basically my takeaway for the Pixelbook Go. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of it. It's a Chromebook.
Yeah. I mean, you can't go wrong. I mean, Chromebooks are cool. But this one could just be a little better, I think, for the money, or a bit cheaper, basically. I want to talk about that voice recording app they showed us. I know it leaked quite a bit before the event, but there's a recorder app built into the Pixel 4 that I wonder if it's going to be downloadable from the App Store for other people, or if it's exclusive to the Pixel. Do you know?
It is exclusive to the Pixel. I'm not sure if it's exclusive to the Pixel 4. I think it is. I don't think it is.
Okay, just Pixels.
I think it's Pixel 4. I think it is exclusive to the Pixel 4 technically, but you can install it on previous versions by sideloading it.
But you can install it on other Android phones, though, right?
No.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, I just want to touch on it very briefly because it's not the first voice recorder app out there that can transcribe in pseudo real time and then give you notes that are searchable. But it's definitely the best implementation of that I've ever seen. And it really shows Google's know-how with the assistant over the years of understanding natural speech, natural language, human language, spoken language. And it's kind of mind-blowing because it also works offline. I mean, it's just kudos. This is one of the things that kind of really was a highlight for me yesterday.
Isn't that weird, though, that like the highlight of a hardware event was an app that transcribes voice recordings in real time?
But I mean, it's because it's something that we all could use more, right? Like, I mean, You could like imagine right now I'm recording this on a laptop with this podcast with a nice condenser mic in a hotel room here in New York, so it's going to sound good for my listeners. But I'm also doing a backup recording on a phone just in case. Wouldn't it be great if I had a transcript I could put of the show, right? If both my guest and myself were running the voice recorder, we could just both have a transcript, and I could like put it into the show notes or something for people who are hearing impaired. It opens up all kinds of things that I think are pretty awesome. The searchability to me is what Google shines at. So that it's kind of a perfect marriage, right?
It is. And what's interesting here is this isn't the first time a company's done this. There's a really good app called Otter on the
that's right.
Play Store. And that works great, but it's expensive if you want to do more than a few thousand words. And it's not great in terms of accuracy. Samsung actually includes a transcription option in its voice recorder app. But I used it yesterday during my meetings with Google, and it was bad. Like it was really, really inaccurate to the point where it was barely usable. So, and it has a 10-minute maximum. Wow. The good thing about Google is that it's all done on device, right? So you're not sending anything up to Google servers. And the phone is powerful enough that it'll do everything in relative real time, and it's pretty damn accurate. We know this because Google's neural networks have proven really competent for just voice relay in general. If you want to transcribe, or if you want to like dictate a message to somebody, it just works and it's really reliable.
I mean, this is the thing I think a lot of lay people don't understand. And, you don't really have to be an engineer to get this, but maybe you do. That's my background, so it's kind of hard for me to kind of separate it in my head when I see this stuff, is that machine learning only works well when the sample data you give it, like the learning data, is massive, right? And right now, this is where Google is so strong with both imaging in terms of machine learning and voice, like voice recognition in terms of machine learning, because they have the biggest data sets in the world. Because people have been talking to Google Assistant forever now, and because people have been taking photos and feeding photos to Google by letting Google index the web forever. And so the data sets are so much more massive than anything Apple and Huawei and Samsung have, that they are just, going to be better, period. And, I'm sure there's a bit of Google sauce in there because they have some pretty mighty engineering backgrounds. But this is the kind of stuff that shows you how hardware doesn't really matter, right? Like at this point, it's just a microphone. You talk about commodity hardware, right? The input is just a mic. But it's fascinating to me, and I think it's very exciting.
I mean, it just proves that this is Google's strength. When as much as Google dabbles in hardware, I still think that it'll always dabble. Whereas with software, it's where it shines, and it comes back to data. Why is its hardware good? Because of data. Mm-hmm. We learned earlier this summer that Google was going around parts of the country, in Atlanta, for instance, and asking people to share their facial data. They were paying people $5 for a facial scan. We now know that was for the Pixel 4 and its face unlock feature to make it more accurate with different ethnicities, ages, etc. A little controversial, obviously, because we found out that the contractor was paying homeless people, but It was all for the purpose of making this face unlock feature faster and more reliable. They were using the data to make it more reliable. So there's nothing magic about anything that Google does with its hardware. It's just that it has more data because more people use Google than any other service on the planet, basically.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on those Pixel Buds version 2.0?
Oh my God.
Really quickly, because I want
to
touch on some other things. Yeah, me too. It's really a bummer that they kind of really pre-announced these for 2020, which is 3 months from now. And the price, $179.
Not even spring.
Yeah, $179,
spring of
right?
2020.
Is that the price?
Yeah, it's $179.
So what's your take on that? I mean, they do look a little bulky compared to the standard Bear AirPods. They do not have active noise cancellation, or do they?
They do not. They have passive noise cancellation with an ambient exhaust to let in a little bit of outside audio so that
Okay.
you don't feel like you're being suffocated.
Yep.
So I'll push back a little bit because I got to not wear them, but I got to hold them and look at them. They're actually the buds themselves are smaller than the Galaxy buds.
Okay.
So they're pretty small, shaped like a Galaxy bud. So not a long tube, but more like a bud that sits on your ear and sticks out a tiny bit. The case itself, about the same size as the AirPods case.
Yeah, it's really small. Yeah.
So I think they did a good job, especially coming from the originals, because wow, those were bad.
Yeah, totally. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to see where they take this. I'm not quite sure because the last ones were kind of such a disaster, but I'm hoping they can only go up from here. So, yeah, I think it's cool. I'm excited about it. Anything else that stood out really quickly before we switch to a few little other more like maintenance news topics?
Look, I mean, the Nest announcements were fine. The Nest Mini is basically the same thing as the company announced 2 years ago. My only major concern, it uses a barrel connector for power, not a USB-C cable, which is super weird.
Do that?
I think for cost savings, they put a more powerful amplifier and speaker inside.
Right.
These DC barrel connectors are cheaper to manufacture. They don't have to pay the USB-C standards body to license the tech, so that is probably why they did it. Sucks either way. I think the Nest router is interesting. I think putting basically a Nest Mini inside all of the access points is a stroke of genius. And it puts Google Assistant in every room where there's one of these mesh
it's amazing.
access points.
I've said this forever that these mesh routers should all have a speaker built into them. But why doesn't the main one have a speaker? Because now you need a mini next to it. It doesn't make sense.
So my theory is that if you have a single Google Assistant speaker in your house, it's likely going to be either in your living room or your kitchen, which is close to where the main router is. So I think that they probably did data to show, or they probably collected enough data to show most people already have a Google Assistant speaker near their main router, and it would just be doubling up.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It does make sense. Plus, it's so cheap to get a speaker anyway. What are they, $49 or something?
Yeah, $49. It's a nice upgrade, new color. There's like a sky blue color that looks really good. But other than that, it's basically the same product.
Yeah, so for me, that was exciting too. I'm excited about the fact that it's wall mountable without an accessory. I won't do it, but why? Like, of course you do that. It's one of those duh moments, like why would you need an accessory to mount something on the wall? That's so Apple to have an accessory for everything. But yeah. So in other news, I want to just shift to some kind of like things that I've come across in the last week or so that we didn't cover on the last podcast, because the last podcast was a pretty heavy one because we talked about Essential.
Right.
So,
you had Florence Ion on.
Yeah, I don't know if you got a chance to hear that. But anyway, OnePlus has some news. They had a new phone this week. Who knew? I mean, yeah, we all knew, of course. The OnePlus 7T Pro, as we'd imagine, dropped like basically a week or two after the OnePlus 7T. And it's exactly what you'd expect. It's a OnePlus 7 Pro with a Snapdragon 855 Plus. What else is different? Oh, and the new faster charge, Warp Charge 30T. That's it, right? There's nothing else to it.
Slightly bigger battery.
Oh, okay. How much bigger is it now?
It's 85 milliamp hours bigger.
Well, that's not much.
Not much.
Yeah, but it's something. But anyway, I think that's cool. It's not coming to the US. That's not cool. And they have a McLaren edition, which is decked out with 12 gigs of RAM or something. And it's also not coming to the US. And I can't even get a review in it. I've asked Eric. I'm like, come on, Eric, you can give me a review. And he's like, nope, not sold in the US. Cannot give you a review. Like, come on.
Yeah, they're very strict about that.
It's so weird. I don't get it. It's like, don't you want some attention on these things? I guess they don't. So where are they selling this thing if they're not selling it in the US? Which is weird because, they sold the other one only in the US and then they sold the 7T only in the US. I don't get their strategy there.
No, me neither. I think it comes down to carrier partnerships. So they have a partnership with T-Mobile in the US.
Price point is important for that. Yeah.
and they didn't want to replace the 7 Pro, which is still a fine phone, with the 7T Pro, which is it's slightly finer phone. And the OnePlus 7 never came to the US, so they replaced the 6T with the 7T, and now they have the 7T and the 7 Pro in the US. Really weird strategy, honestly, Miriam. This is the first year where I'm like, what are you doing, OnePlus?
Yeah,
and then I don't think they'll do it again. I don't think this will be repeated next year. I think they'll figure it out.
I hope so. I mean, why should we? Especially, I can understand in some markets, like to me, the 7 not being available in the US kind of made sense, but the 7T Pro not being available, like, why would you want 2 options? You just sell it unlocked. You don't have to have a carrier partnership. You don't even have to offer it to T-Mobile. Just sell it on your website for the fans, Like, some people are going to buy it. I don't know. It's just a weird strategy. And then the other thing is that, there's not going to be a 5G version of that phone. So clearly, as we all have said, you and myself and almost every tech journalist that covers mobile for months now, do not bother with 5G on a phone right now. And I think OnePlus was super gung-ho, and they're feeling it because they probably didn't sell many of those 5G phones at all.
I don't think they sold more than a handful of them. And, 5G is still a massive question mark, especially in North America. So not surprising. But yeah, I really do think that the early 5G products that came out this year were just lip service to the carriers.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I'm glad for OnePlus that they got a custom version of the OnePlus 7 Pro for Sprint, as a 5G device. That's cool because that got them to another carrier. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see the OnePlus 7T land on another carrier in the US sometime soon. I'm sure they're working on that. I would do it.
You don't have any inside information here.
No, I'm
not
just
hinting.
I'm totally not. This is my wish, and it seems to make sense in my gut that they would want to do that. But I don't know anything that's in progress for that. Speaking of other phones that are affordable, mid-range flagships or affordable flagships versus premium flagship is how I've been kind of naming these phones. Like, the Google Pixel 4 falls in the premium flagship category, and the OnePlus 7T falls in the affordable flagship category. But they're both flagships. They're just cheaper. Oppo is turning that Reno line into a complete nightmare of a SKU. Nobody can keep track of all the new phones that are launched under the Reno brand. I'm not trying to be mean to Oppo. I think the Reno phones are cool. I have a Reno 2 here in my pocket, and I think it's a very nice phone. But there's now a new one called the Oppo Reno Ace with a Gundam edition because it's a gaming-oriented phone. It's not a gaming phone, but it has, gaming. I don't know. Like, it's got maybe a 730G. Snapdragon 730G?
Yeah, 730G is...
Yeah, so it's a gaming
fine.
optimized chip, but it's not a gaming phone. But anyway, they launched it this past week along with a new charging technology. I don't know what they call it now, SuperVOOC 9000. I'm joking. But it's 30 minutes fully charged with a 65-watt charger. Where do you think this madness is going to stop?
I don't think it'll stop. I mean, they might as well call it Firewatch because
but they have to stop, because if you made a 100-watt charger, physically it would be bigger than a MacBook Pro charger.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's 2 options when you're charging a phone. You have to put the heat somewhere. It either has to be in the phone or in the charger, and they're putting it in the charger, which means that the power banks are going to be bigger, and it's just going to generate more heat at the wall. The other part of it, too, is, these are lithium-ion batteries, which explode if they're damaged, and putting more current through them has a higher chance of generating heat, which could lead to battery explosions. And I'm not saying that Oppo or OnePlus or any of these companies, Huawei, as they increase speed, they're not necessarily increasing the risk, but there is risk, and I don't know whether it's worth it.
No, I mean, I'm not opposed to this. It's interesting to me that there's this kind of arms race that Oppo seems to be leading of who can charge a phone the fastest. And at this point, we're at 30 minutes with whatever VOOC number, Super VOOC, whatever designation they call it. I was joking saying Super VOOC 9000 earlier, but it could be pretty much.
It does sound pretty good. It rolls
It
off
does
the
sound
tongue.
good, right? Yeah. So anyway, if it's 30 minutes with a 65-watt charger now, and the chargers are pretty big, obviously, because of that, which is one drawback. The way they're doing it is interesting. Part of it is the battery formulation. You can use what's it called? Nanotechnology. Carbon nanotubes is a great way to make new lithium batteries that charge faster. And also by having multiple cells inside the phone instead of a single cell, you can parallel charge them. So you're charging a whole bunch of smaller packs rather than charging one big pack. They did that with, I think the Oppo R17 was the first to use 2 packs instead of 1. So this might use 3 packs. And then, of course, current and voltage. You combine high voltage, like 28 volts is what laptops use for USB-C, and then high current. So like if you use 28 volts at 2 amps, the current is still manageable. 2 amps is reasonable for charging a lithium-ion battery, but you now have 28 volts coming in there. The challenge is to convert that high voltage that you're charging the cells with back into a lower voltage that the phone can use. So there's going to be some circuitry in there to do that. So that's kind of an engineering look at it. But, it's not rocket science. It's just, as you said, like there's a limit here and they're going to hit it soon. And not only that, but do you really need that? I think an hour to fully charge your phone is a kind of a sweet spot. I think the 30 to 45 watt charging is a sweet spot. And it still makes the adapter reasonable size. But anything beyond that, I feel like you're starting to play with fire, maybe possibly literally. And you are starting to have a battery pack that's insane. But it's worth mentioning, which is why I brought it up,
Look, I think it's admirable that these companies are competing on charging speed, right? Phones are getting more powerful. They're using more battery. This needs to be a thing, but I'd prefer companies focus on wireless charging speed if they're going to do anything. Huawei seems to be the only company really pushing that side forward.
Xiaomi as well. Xiaomi is really pushing hard. They have, I think, 28 watt wireless, 27 watt wireless charging now.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's the same as the
Mate
same
30
as the
Pro. Mate 30 Pro. Yep. They announced that with the latest Mi Mix, not Mi Mix,
Alpha? The Alpha,
not
right?
the Alpha. That's a prototype. I'm talking about the last production, the Mi 9 Pro. Mi 9 Pro.
You know what? I applaud you for being able to keep up with all of the Oppo, Vivo, sub and their sub brands. Like all of those models, I don't know how you remember what they are.
Well, it's hard. I don't always remember properly. The other thing is that the reason I do is because I think the Chinese phones are the most innovative phones today. I think they're very interesting, at least in terms of hardware. Software is always a bit of another story. But I also feel that it's important because a lot of my audience is like, I think the third largest part of my audience is in India. And so they get these phones. And so for me, it's important to have some content that they can directly relate to,
That's great.
Speaking of phones we can't get in the US or even in India, Sony launched an Xperia 8 in Japan. I'm literally not going to say anything more because we should wrap up, but there is now an Xperia 8, which is unique to Japan. I will have a link in the show notes about it. It's something I wanted to cover last week, but we fell through the cracks. So check that out. And then the last thing I wanted to quickly say is that I want to thank Sony for inviting me to an event here in New York yesterday about 360 reality audio, which is this latest technology. It's very similar to Dolby Atmos, and they've been working on it for a while, and they presented it at CES, and I got the chance to listen to it for the first time yesterday, and it's quite impressive. I mean, as somebody who's worked in video game audio before I was a journalist and really is a bit of an audiophile, it's not my thing, but I have to say that it is impressive and they're potentially onto something. And so very soon you'll be able to download so it requires content that's created for it. So very soon you'll be able to download content from Deezer and Tidal that will support this audio technology, which doesn't require special hardware. It's all software based. So it should work on most any hardware with any headphones, but it'll require special content. So that's something that I want to talk about some more in the future show once I actually get to try it out and A/B compare it to some of, like in-house in a quiet spot where I can really do that. But I just wanted to let you know that
sounds really exciting.
Sony's doing
really
something
interested.
again. Yeah, and Sony, it's always a little tricky when they do something because they tend to still like, a lot of it is to do with partnerships with, musicians and record labels and stuff. And there's always this weird fear that it's not going to take off because it's so complicated. There's so many moving parts. But I'm all for us finding ways to enjoy audio in an even better way. So I had to come and check it out. So I want to thank them for having me. And speaking of, Daniel, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been wanting to come on your show for so long, and I need to return the favor. So if any of your listeners also listen to the Android Central podcast, expect to hear you on there very soon.
I would love to be there. I'm going to now give you a chance to tell people where they can find you on the internet.
Super simple. You can find me at JourneyDan, so it's Journeyman with a D, at Twitter, Instagram, all the things. And you can find my work and all of my colleagues' work at AndroidCentral.com.
Yes, you should read Android Central. Is by far the definitive source of all things Android, so check it out.
Thank you.
No,
I don't think so. We got a lot of good competition out there.
Well, obviously we
do good work.
I also write stories for Android Police, but I think that, competition is healthy, and I'm always a big fan of your coverage. So
thank you. That means a lot.
You folks all know where to find me. I'm at Tankgirl on Twitter and Instagram. That's like the comic book character Tankgirl without the vowels, TNKGRL. So go find my Twitter. If you want to comment on the podcast, comment there. Tell me what your thoughts are. Tell me what I did wrong. I would love to hear it. Tell me what I did right. Also, there's a YouTube channel that goes with the podcast, youtube.com/Miriam Jouar. That's my full name without a space. So if you go to Twitter, you can see my name, Miriam space Jouar. Just remove the space, tack that onto the end of youtube.com/ and you will get the awesome YouTube channel. It's basically a bunch of complimentary content to this podcast, extra videos, hands-ons, unboxings, that kind of stuff. So if you want to see some visuals to go along with your listening experience, check out the YouTube channel. Please subscribe, like, tell your friends, click the little notification icon, all that stuff. And of course, the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. If it's your first time on the show and you're like, where the hell did this come from? Well, there it is. You can subscribe. There's an RSS feed there. But also, I'm on all the major platforms: Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher. I'm everywhere. So just go and look for Mobile Tech Podcast, subscribe, and again, spread the word. I can use your love. There's a bunch of deals on my blog, tankgirl.com. Tankgirl, just like the Twitter handle, tnkgrl.com. If you're looking for buying a phone and you want to get a better deal, potentially, go check out the blog posts. I post regularly some Amazon links and GearBest links for good phone deals. And then finally, I want to thank our sponsor, Audible.com. Audible is the awesomest platform for audiobooks. If you, for whatever reason, cannot read a book physically on paper or e-ink, maybe you're driving all day, you're a delivery driver and you want to listen to books, Audible is your best choice. So check it out. Audible.com has been with us almost since the beginning of the show, and I really want to thank them for being there. As a little present to you guys, there is a link in the show notes for a deal. So if you want to try out Audible, there is a URL you can click on. It's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. And if you click through there, you support the podcast. So the deal is you get 30-day trial, and you can decide to renew or continue or end after that. But no matter what, you get to keep one of the books you download. And there's tons of selection. I recently listened to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy again because that was cool. And then, there's like a lot of books read by the authors and everything. So audible.com, check it out. Thanks to Audible for being awesome and a supporter of the show. And thanks again, Daniel, for being my guest. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, stay tuned. We'll have another show next week. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.